Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and a few of you have asked me to share my opinion on The Chosen, which is a TV series that sort of shows and represents the life of Jesus of Nazareth as based on the Gospels, but also with quite a little bit of artistic freedom, if you will. Now, in general, as a TV series, for what I've seen so far, I haven't watched all the seasons available, but I have sort of been browsing around quite a bit in the last few days, and I have to say, for me, it's a little average in the sense that there are some things that I really like, there are other things that I'm not a huge fan of, the way they are represented, but in general, today I want to go a little more technical, since I know you guys noble ones enjoy this, and therefore we're going to review sort of the historical setting, the costume department, and a few of the specific episodes that I've chosen, simply to see if the representation is correct, not only from a sort of historical standpoint, so the way, is this what people looked in first century Roman Judea, so the way they were dressed. We'll focus of course on the military gear and attire of the Roman soldiers, which is shown multiple times in the show, but also the way the events are represented, if they are literally following the gospel or if they are moving sort of a little bit away from it. Alright, so what we're going to do, I'm going to go top right. I just want to show you got quite a few things prepared here, and I would like to begin by analyzing the sort of Roman military dress, okay, since I'm a little bit of a Roman boo. I want to show you very briefly, we have a couple of things to show. So we've got Jesus' arrest. Let's let it, I won't be able to let it play very much because we don't want to get any copyright strike, but as you can see already at the very beginning, we see a bunch of Roman soldiers coming to arrest Jesus. So let's have a look at the way they are dressed first, and then we'll discuss about the event from a scriptural standpoint, whether it's actually following what the Gospels are saying, particularly when we look at them jumping into interlinear translation. Okay, so the first thing I want to say, since we already changed scene, first of all, I have a little bit of a problem with the number of soldiers here, but before we jump into that, how are they dressed? Well, the officer, his name is Gaius, in this case is wearing, we can see a lorica segmentata, and if we scroll forward a little bit, here we go, here we see it from the back a little bit, the shoulder plates. Okay, so first of all, I have to say, so at least he's wearing armor that looks believable, but what they are wearing, these other soldiers, this sort of leather version of lorica segmentata, is horrible, absolutely horrible. So you can love the script writing, you can love the dialogue, you can love it for whatever reason you want, but definitely I do not love it for the costume department when it comes to the Roman soldiers. So we are of course in Imperial Rome, and the fact that he's wearing lorica segmentata is absolutely fine. I mean, as an officer, probably I would have given him mail, so lorica hamata or gallica, but then again, it's not impossible for an officer to wear a lorica segmentata, but I have to say, it looks as if he's wearing it the upside down, like the other way around. Like these look like backplates to me. So unfortunately I can't really confirm it 100% because I can't see the back. Even if we were to find a shot from the back, he's wearing a mantle, which is fine by the way for a Roman officer and soldiers in general. They would wear capes, particularly if it was cold, but it does look like they don't know how the armor works, and this is actually the back plates. That's what it looks like, because generally the pectoral plates are single, they're not segmented like this. Regardless of that, even let's say that they found something that I've never seen in my life and it actually did look like this, in that case there is a problem of how it's fastened. Two problems here. Problem number one is not shutting it down correctly. Like look, there's this massive opening here. There's absolutely, there is no reason for a Roman soldier not to wear his armor properly, so this needed to be fastened all the way here so that the frontal plates would overlap and provide actual protection. In this case, what's the point of wearing the entire suit of armor if someone could just stab you in the heart? Also, we see there is another gap here. Now, this is something that happens a lot with historical reenactors. Simply is a situation of, there are two leather straps in here if this is the front, there are usually four if it's the back, but regardless, we have two leather straps here. They just need to tighten it up one notch. Just one notch, and this will once again go underneath these plates, and you will not have a gap here. So the armor is worn incorrectly. It looks like he's wearing it with the back in the front. And another massive problem that I have here is, of course, everyone has got Braces, leather braces everywhere. Now I'll jump into the leather braces in a second on a mini rant, but yes, when it comes to the lorica, the leather version of the lorica segmentata, this looks absolutely horrible. There is no historical justification whatsoever. This used to be a little bit of a debate because they found a piece of leather that was like just this, and they thought maybe belonged to a lorica segmentata, but it was debunked already, I want to say, in the late 90s or early 2000s, and it's not a thing. A full leather lorica segmentata is not a thing. There is no iconographic description of it, and it really looks cheap, it looks silly, and it will provide zero protection whatsoever. So this is not a uniform of the Roman army. The helmets as well, the cheek plates, first of all, these helmets are clearly too big, particularly for this guy here. I mean, the helmet is massive. Instead, we know that Roman soldiers would have their armor usually tailored to their body, definitely the helmets. And although mass-produced helmets existed, the historical example, more of a matter of, well, okay, the top knob, for example, on helmets that had it might have been off-center for cheap versions, but usually they wouldn't make them massive and just give them to a soldier, because it's gonna be, this could fall off very easily. Also, the cheek plates should be fastened and closed here, whereas in this case they're just putting them on their head, but they're not tying the knots. In fact, it seems like there is no lacing. All of this looks extremely cheap, Indian-made costume armor that I don't know why they went for this, since at the end of the day, well-made lorica segmentata don't cost that much. So I imagine they spent probably $200 each for these, and this one was probably 300. A real lorica segmentata well-made is gonna cost $350. So if you have a budget, in this case, they were not advised properly. This is the problem, because with the exact same budget, I could have done a much, not just me, anyone who understands Roman armor properly could have done a much better job. Now, when it comes to the way he's wearing this, if we jump into another episode, such as the one where Jesus is kind of confronting the Pharisees, we see that instead at least the armor has been fastened correctly. So they can do it. It's just that I think sometimes the prop department, because usually you've got, I've worked on a, by the way, production specifically about the Jesus movie many years ago, and I remember you have prop artists, and their job is to dress the soldiers and all the different people that are taking part correctly. So in this case, I still think is wearing it the other way around. So this is the back, but at least it's fastened correctly here, and then they just need to lift these up a little bit, and the Roman soldier will be a bit more believable, and then swap it around. Interestingly, however, to give them a little credit as well, is that at least the soldiers are wearing what is called a focale or focalia. For those of you who are interested in classical Latin pronunciation, both vowels, when it comes to phonemic vowel length, are long. Focale, focale. Anyways, so he's wearing the scarf, which is fantastic. A lot of the time, even in historical reenactment, we see soldiers without this. Instead, pretty much all soldiers would have owned at least a few of these, and then they're great because not only they help with the sweat to keep you, if it's cold, of course, it functions as a scarf, but also it helps you so that you don't get chafing from all the plates constantly rubbing against your neck while you're on the march. This is fantastic that they did this, but one thing I do have a problem here is that you see that this Roman soldier is wearing what is a vertical crest, and the reason why I know it's a vertical crest is because even in this other scene, it absolutely see, it's a little dark, but you can see it's vertical, it's not horizontal. Now, vertical crests were only used during parades, and that was pretty much it. When it comes to actual crests used in battle, we have horizontal crests, so the ones that go like this, and they are used by centurions so that you can identify your commanding officer of your century, which is 80 fighting men, by the way. You can recognize him on the field even if there is a lot of chaos and havoc during the battle, and then you're like, oh, that's my centurion, so that's where I need to look to understand what orders have been issued. If we were to have an officer here, he should have a horizontal crest, not really a vertical one. There's no reason for a vertical crest to be present in these scenes. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. So, now that we have discussed all of this, I want to jump into another episode, which is the episode when Jesus heals the servant son of a Roman centurion. So again, it's Gaius. Not necessarily for the healing part, but because of the way he's... So, this is an actual very interesting Yeah, I got him under the light a little better. So what is he wearing here? So what we see is that he's wearing, again, the braces. I'll go into my full rant in a second, but at the end of the day, he's wearing a tunic. Now, the tunic, they're wearing two different tunics. The Roman guy is wearing a short-sleeved tunic, whereas the Jew is wearing a sleeveless. Now, in reality, for what we know, of course, both existed in the Roman world, but actually a sleeveless tunic would have been more common for the military, so even if he was wearing a sleeveless one, it wouldn't have been a problem. But these existed too, and then again, he's wealthy, he's an important officer, so I suppose not a big deal, just to give you that little piece of information. Now, when it comes to what he's wearing on top of it, you can see he has got a belt in here that is clearly fabric. Now, these absolutely existed, and usually they will be worn on top of your tunic like we see here because they act as pockets. So basically, a Roman can put money in it, because they didn't have pockets, right? So they can put money underneath this cloth belt, anything they needed, like a little object they were carrying, whatever, and then on top of it they would always wear their cingulum, which is basically their military belt. Now in this case he's wearing it underneath. I would have put it on top, but at least I'm gonna give them credit to the fact that even though he's not in armor, he's still wearing the cingulum, and this is absolutely correct. The reason why this is correct is because a cingulum, so a military belt, is what distinguishes you as a member of the military, in the sense that if you were just a regular Roman citizen, you would basically wear the same kind of tunics that a soldier would wear. So the way you would recognize a member of the military when they are not in full battle gear, is by the belt, because you see that they're wearing the belt, and so, oh, that's a military guy. This was in fact so important in the Roman military that it kind of helps us, once we understand this, it kind of helps us also figure out why someone like the Apostle Paul, who by the way was a Roman by birth, he was born in the city of Tarsus, Cilicia, which had been a Roman province in 64 BC, which is when it was annexed to the Roman Republic. So he was a Roman citizen by birth. To give you an idea, Roman Cilicia would have been in modern day Asia Minor, so kind of the southern coast of Turkey. Being a Roman, he would have absolutely been familiar with the importance of the belt for a military officer, and in general a regular soldier in the army, which is probably why when in Ephesians, which of course Paul wrote, he talks about putting on the armor of God. Well, it's interesting that the first item he mentions is indeed the belt, that he then connects to truth. So he says the belt of truth, and then the breastplate of righteousness, and then you got the shield of faith. I think there is a lot of symbolism that can be understood, the people in period would have absolutely understood, but that we might miss when we read that scripture, because when Paul mentions, for example, the shield of faith, well, it's interesting because scripture says that faith without deeds is dead, and the shield is the only protective element in a soul for a soldier that needs to be actively moved, and it won't provide passive defense like, for example, a breastplate would. And that is something that someone like Paul would have been very familiar with. Similarly, the breastplate of righteousness, of course, being righteous, although I should go deeper into what it means to be righteous or to be just from a period perspective, but I will do that on my upcoming video, Sodom and Gomorrah, where we will go into a deep analysis of what that word exactly means, because it's different to what you might think. When it comes to the belt of truth, it's interesting that it's the first element that he mentions, and I think that is because usually the belt is the first thing you see, whether you're in armor or not, and it kind of defines you as who you are. Okay, so now let me go into this little leather braces everywhere rant, and oh gosh, this is gonna get good. So, personally, I've had to deal with Roman braces on anyone in the classical period for such a long time that I'm just so pissed about it. I need to rant. So every time we look at movies and video games, there are these leather braces on top of everyone, and yet when we look at actual statues, period iconography, we see that braces are not present. Pretty much almost never. And that really is a stark contrast whenever you are familiar with iconography. I understand they look good, they kind of complete the outfit, whether it be like in this case it's the movie Eagle, the movie Centurion, whether it be all the way back to Benur, HBO Rome. This has always been a thing. Spartacus, and yet no bracelets on the statues, no bracelets anywhere, no bracelets on gladiators, no bracelets on the army, Trajan column. It doesn't matter where we look, there are almost never bracelets, and yet in the movies they are omnipresent, and unfortunately this is the case as well for this production. So, since I've been very critical on other productions, including like War Vadis and stuff that is like really old, still braces everywhere, I'm going to be also a little bit like that with this production too, because I just don't understand why you have to have braces everywhere, even though we do not see them in iconography, statues, and the Romans just don't mention them. Now, this doesn't mean that there has never been a Roman who just liked the idea of, hey, you know what, I'm just gonna make a bracelet out of leather. Probably I would say tin, silver, gold would have been more probable, but whatever. Maybe it did happen that one Roman at one point did have one little leather bracelet and they decided to wear it. Yet, we don't see it. It's nowhere. So now instead it's become a thing that we just can't, if we see Romans without a bracelet, it's like they can't even leave their home, never mind join the military. It's like the first thing they're given when they join the military. If you become a Roman soldier, you've got to cover those wrists, because if you don't, well then you're not a soldier. Sort of. And that really just annoys me, and I felt like I needed to cover it very briefly. So, nothing, no bracelets. Oh look, a bracelet, rare there, I'm joking, no bracelet. There we go, I'm back, and you can see here, this is where I marked every single time in the first episode of Alexander, which is a recent Netflix production that I covered on this channel. Once again, bracelets everywhere. It's like an obsession. It's my nemesis. It's like I wake up in the morning, in the middle of the night from like night terrors, because that's all I see. Bracelets, bracelets, bracelets. Alright, now that I've got that out of my system, let's review Jesus' arrest, and let's see if it's done according to the correct interpretation or the literal translation of Scripture. So we got to the part where the soldiers arrive and then Jesus is waiting for them, and then of course they're telling him, hey, you're coming with us. Then there is this interesting statement by Jesus. Let's check it out.
Are you armed?
I am not, but some of my followers are.
Alright, so he's saying, hey, we've got weapons, and then the Roman soldiers, oh my gosh, this looks so bad. I mean, look how long the tunic is. He wouldn't be able to walk and work as a Roman. He should be all the way up to his knees. So they react by drawing their gladi. Also notice that they are all wearing their swords on the left. In reality, Roman soldiers should wear their swords on the right, because they are wearing a massive shield usually, or carrying a massive shield, and so at any point if they need to draw the sword this way, if they were also wearing the shield, they would need to move it out of the way, which means that someone could, throw an arrow at them. So in general, a Roman soldier always wears his sword on the right side, exception being officers. So if Gaius is wearing his sword on the left, which he is, I can see here, I don't have a problem with that. But that every single soldier is wearing the sword, oh, this guy's wearing it on the right, I appreciate that. They should all be wearing it on the right. Instead, all of this, so they can't all be officers, they're just guards. They're just soldiers. Anyways, why is Jesus saying that they have got weapons? Well, that is correct. That is absolutely correct. Not only we know that one of them, I'll tell you who in a second, because it's actually interesting that out of the 4 Gospels, only one, the Gospel of John, tells us who was carrying a weapon and drew it in this situation, which is, by the way, something they don't show. For some reason, the whole situation where he would cut the ear of one of the Jewish temple guards that are not present, by the way, so they're not following the Gospels here. There should be a lot more soldiers. I'll justify it in a minute by jumping into Greek translation. There should also be temple guards and Jewish priests, and then there should be the situation where, the ear is cut. All of that is gone, so it's not a good representation of Jesus' arrest. I don't see Judas here. There is no kiss scene. With that being said, did they have weapons? Yes. In fact, there is a passage a little bit earlier than this scene in the Gospels that says that Jesus specifically told his disciples to sell a few mantles so that they can get money to buy blades, to buy swords. So he did instruct his apostles to buy weapons, and it's absolutely true that they were carrying weapons. Now, what weapons were they carrying? Well, in this specific scene they show, and by the way, the fact that the Roman soldiers, the moment he mentions weapons, draw the swords without their commanding officer issuing the order is also strange. I don't think that would have happened. They're all wearing armor. They are surrounding them. They have numerical superiority. They are all trained soldiers, and these are fishermen. There is no reason for the soldiers to react like that. I understand it's very cinematic. There still is no reason to do it. If he gave the order, that's a different story. Remember that we're talking about extremely highly disciplined troops. Oh my gosh, look at this. Anyway, here, there we go. So, some kind of baton and then a very small knife. Now, that is not necessarily incorrect, in the sense that the scripture actually mentions in Greek that it's a bladed weapon. And talking about the blade, 3 of the 4 Gospels do not tell us who this specific disciple is, but John does and identifies him as Simon Peter. Today I'd like to focus on the very fact that Simon Peter had a sword in the first place, because what this tells us is that at least some of Jesus' followers did have weapons on them. Now, the reason why I chose to say a bladed weapon and not necessarily a sword first is because we don't exactly know if it was a sword or if it was more of a knife or a tool. That is because it's difficult to point it out linguistically, and more evidence would be required to be that specific in the translation, at least to deem it conclusive. But from the purposes of the Romans, whether it be a knife or whether it be a full-on sword, some of these people were indeed armed. There is indeed a possible correlation between what we just read and the idea that Jesus' opponents were indeed trying to pin possible anti-Roman propaganda on him as a way to find an excuse to denounce him to the Roman authorities. This is evident in the following passage. They say unto him, Master, we know that thou art true, and carest for no man, for thou regardest not the person of men, but teachest the ways of God in truth. Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar, or not? Shall we give, or shall we not give? But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said unto them, Why tempt ye me? Bring me a penny that I may see it. And they brought it. And he saith unto them, Who is this image and superscription? And they said unto him, Caesar's. And Jesus answering said unto them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. So Jesus' replies elegantly dodges the political implication of such a statement and loaded question. In other words, what they were obviously trying to do was they expected him to say, no, don't pay your taxes to Rome, so that they could denounce him to the authorities. Didn't work.
Did you meet Atticus? He's cohortes urbanae. They're like Caesar's personal detectives.
What is he talking about? Well, this is actually very historical, and I love that they introduced that, because yes, Rome did absolutely have a sort of espionage department. In fact, they had multiple, and I would like to now take the next little section of this video to tell you a little bit about these Roman spies that were dispatched all over the provinces of the empire, and before that the republic, and then even in the late empire they developed into very, very different types of spies. But yes, they did have secret agents. So let's talk about that.
Scipio Africanus. He used spies to gather intelligence on his arch-enemy Hannibal, whom himself made use of many spies. It is said that Scipio Africanus trained his spies himself. Of course, these spies' main duty was to gather intelligence on their enemy, positioning, fighting force, possibly objectives. But in order to see the development of these early spies into actual agents, we have to go past the Second Punic War. The real organizer, as we could say, creator of the actual Roman secret services was Julius Caesar. Of course it was Julius Caesar. He selected these men among auxiliary soldiers, and more specifically, those who were the best at riding horses. He then taught them how to draw maps, procure their own food, how to hide and use any sort of improvised object as a weapon. In a military context, they were used in disguise to infiltrate enemy armies, posing as merchants or sellers of all sorts of things, including weapons and the services of prostitutes. They had to be able to speak the language of the enemy well, so in most cases they had to be from a local or neighboring tribe. They had to know the lay of the land well, and they should not be big or muscular, so as to not be noticeable. Nonetheless, they needed to know how to fight and to defend themselves. Spies were usually sent to live for some time in the areas the Romans were planning to invade, as to gather as much intel as possible. This work, together with that of the exploratores, or the scouts, was used in order to identify where villages and towns were, but also the position of rivers for water, woods for timber, and defendable geographic positions, where farms were located, which could then be plundered during war.
Now I would like to mention very briefly this idea of the number of soldiers that are reaching here. Here we see about 10 people, and that's, I imagine, 10 soldiers. Let's imagine how people normally imagine it. I think there were a lot more soldiers. So let me defend that. This is, of course, my own interpretation, so they don't have to stick to that. I'm just saying, I think I can bring something interesting to the table here. Let's see what Scripture tells us in English first. The three synoptic gospels describe the Roman soldiers accompanying Judas with the word multitude, great multitude, in the King James Version, whereas in the New Catholic Version and the New International Version we have the words crowd, great crowd. Let's have a look at the Interlinear Greek English. In the Interlinear we have indeed the word ochlos, which does translate crowd. Even more specifically, it can be interpreted as a dynamic crowd. In the King James Version, John uses the word band of men. In the New Catholic Version, we have a detachment of soldiers. Same in the New International Version. So once again, let's have a look at the Interlinear Greek English. Here is where the situation becomes interesting. We have the word spiran, most likely pronounced speran in period, which translates as cohort. A cohort is the 10th part of a legion. That's 600 armed men. For 12 men, preaching turning the other cheek. Anyhow, as a first video, I kind of wanted to do a brief reaction to a few of the aspects that I found significant of The Chosen. But I have to say, I don't hate it. I don't love it. I don't think it's the best representation of Jesus' life that I've ever seen, or the period, but I don't think it's the worst. With that being said, if you think this video was interesting, please let me know. Let me know in the comments. Make sure that there is enough engagement, because I would like to continue. I can make a dedicated series, a dedicated video specifically to the way the actor they chose, the way for Jesus, the way he's dressed, the way he speaks, his ethnicity, his looks. His height, everything, his hair, his beard. We can discuss that. Make a dedicated video. I can also make a video dedicated to other aspects, other things that happen, because as you can see, just small little snippets really unfold into a very, very deep analysis if you really have the time to do it. And last but not least, I am aware that there is a little controversy when it comes to something that happened on set, a flag that was found on set. I decided not to talk about it on this first episode, because today I just wanted to focus on the historical aspects of it. But if that's also something you want to cover, I'm more than happy to talk about it and share my opinions. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and as always, if you're not a member of this community, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.